Tragedy struck on May 18, 2017, when the music world was left reeling from the devastating news of Chris Cornell's sudden and shocking death.
Cornell died unexpectedly late last night. He was in Detroit and he was 52 years old. His music career spanned more than 3 decades and he performed with a number of bands. This video is believed to be from his final show last night in Detroit, just hours before his death.
Yet behind his spotlight, Cornell was secretly struggling with inner demons that would ultimately lead him down a dark path. Chris John Cornell was best known as the lead vocalist, rhythm guitarist, and the primary lyricist for the rock bands Soundgarden and Audioslave. He also had a solo career and contributed to numerous movie soundtracks. Cornell was the founder and frontman of Temple of the Dog, a one-off tribute band dedicated to his late friend, musician Andrew Wood. Several music journalists, fan polls, and fellow musicians have regarded Cornell as one of the greatest rock singers of all time. His tragic and unexpected death has remained one of the biggest mysteries in pop culture, and the sheer brutality of his death has continued to raise many unanswered questions till this day. Cornell is considered a key figure of the 1990s grunge movement with an extensive songwriting history, a nearly 4-octave vocal range, and a powerful vocal belting technique. Cornell released 4 solo studio albums: Euphoria Morning, Carry On, Scream, and Higher Truth. His last solo release before his death was the charity single The Promise, written for the ending credits for the 2016 film of the same name. Cornell was born Christopher John Boyle on July 20th, 1964, in Seattle, Washington, where he was raised. His parents are Edward F. Boyle, a pharmacist of Irish Catholic descent, and Karen Boyle, an accountant of Jewish background and self-proclaimed psychic. Cornell was one of 6 children. He had 2 older brothers and 3 younger sisters. He and his siblings adopted his mother's maiden name, Cornell, following their parents' divorce when they were teenagers. Cornell attended Christ the King, a Catholic elementary school, where he performed for the first time in front of a crowd, singing the 1960s anti-war song, One Tin Soldier. When he was in 7th grade, his mother pulled him and his sister out of Catholic school for fear they were about to be expelled for being too inquisitive. He recalled the episode in a 1994 interview with Request magazine. With a religion like that, it's not designed for anyone to question. Being young people who have a natural curiosity and half a brain, you're going to start finding inconsistencies, which there are tons of in organized religion. We both sort of made it clear in classroom situations that we didn't get it. Explain this to me. And they couldn't, so we started creating a lot of problems. Cornell subsequently attended Shorewood High School, where he later dropped out. Growing up, Cornell was heavily influenced by the Beatles, and his love for music only deepened over time. However, his teenage years were also marked by severe depression, which led him to drop out of school. Before becoming a successful musician, Cornell worked as a sous chef at Ray's Boathouse restaurant, and was also a member of a cover band called the Shemps. In 1984, Cornell co-founded the iconic rock band Soundgarden, which would go on to become a pivotal part of the grunge movement. Cornell left with the Shemps in 1983. He traced his musical influences back to Little Richard via the Beatles. Cornell spent a 2-year period between the ages of 9 and 11 solidly listening to the Beatles, after finding a large collection of Beatles records abandoned in the basement of a neighbor's house. Cornell described himself at this age as a loner. He was able to deal with his anxiety around other people through rock music. During his teenage years, he spiraled into severe depression, dropped out of school, and almost never left the house. At the age of 12, Cornell had access to alcohol and marijuana. He used them daily by 13, stopped for a year, but relapsed at age 15 for another year until he turned to music. At 14, he had a bad PCP experience, and later had panic disorder and agoraphobia. Cornell took piano and guitar lessons as a child. He credited his mother for saving his life when she bought him a snare drum, the instrument he first adopted on his path to becoming a rock musician. Before he was a successful musician, Cornell worked as a busboy, as a dishwasher, as a fishmonger at a seafood wholesaler, and as a sous chef at Ray's Boathouse in Seattle. In the early 1980s, Cornell was a member of a Seattle-based cover band called the Shemps, which featured bassist Hiro Yamamoto. After Yamamoto left the Shemps, the band recruited guitarist Kim Thayil. Cornell and Yamamoto stayed in contact, and after the Shemps broke up, the pair started jamming together, eventually bringing Thayil in to join them. In 1985, Cornell started dating Susan Silver, the manager of Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, and Screaming Trees, and they married in 1990. They had a daughter, Lillian Jean, born on June 28, 2000. Cornell and Silver divorced in 2004. In 2004, he married Vicky Karayiannis, a Paris-based American publicist of Greek heritage. The couple had a daughter together, Tony, in September 2004, and a son, Christopher Nicholas, in December 2005. In 2012, the Cornells created the Chris and Vicky Cornell Foundation, which works to aid the homeless, the poor, and abused or neglected children. In 2013, a portion of proceeds from ticket sales went to benefit the cause. Cornell sold 14.8 million albums, 8.8 million digital songs, and 300 million on-demand audio streams in the US alone, as well as over 30 million records worldwide. Nominated for 18 Grammy Awards, he won 3. Cornell was ranked number 1. 4 on the list of heavy metal's all-time top 100 vocalists by Hit Parader number. 9 on the list of best lead singers of all time by Rolling Stone number. 80 on the list of the 200 greatest singers of all time by Rolling Stone. He was voted rock's greatest singer by readers of Guitar World. Despite all his success and accolades, Cornell still had a very real internal struggle against addiction and depression, which he constantly battled every day of his life. Cornell also had a weird relationship with death, as he lost close friends to the cold hands of the Grim Reaper, and somehow it made a huge impact on the way he viewed dying. Cornell was a close friend of late singer Andrew Wood, who was his roommate in Seattle. While living together, they recorded the song Island of Summer, which was written by Cornell and is the only existing recording of the two of them singing together. The song was released in 2011 in the album Melodies and Dreams, a solo album from Andrew Wood featuring unreleased songs he recorded throughout his life. Wood's sudden death in 1990 led Cornell to make a tribute album for him with the band Temple of the Dog. In a 2016 interview with The Guardian promoting the first tour of Temple of the Dog, Cornell said about Wood's death, "I've always had a really difficult time with loss. I didn't deal well with Andy's death. After he died, numerous times I'd be driving and I would look out the window and I thought I saw him. It would take me 5 minutes to update to the moment and realize, no, he's actually dead. This tour, in a sense, is the dealing. It's facing reality." During a 1994 Rolling Stone interview on Kurt Cobain's suicide, when asked if it is legitimate to read a songwriter's suicide into his lyrics after the fact, Cornell said, "When Andy Wood died, I couldn't listen to his songs for about 2 years after that, and it was for that reason his lyrics often seem as though they can tell that story. But then again, my lyrics often could tell the same thing." Cornell battled depression and addiction, managing them until 1997, when Soundgarden disbanded and his first marriage crumbled. At that point, Cornell turned to oxycodone and other substances. He said of that period, and even went without meals for days due to his severe addictions. He was just kind of shutting down at this point, and eventually found that the only way out of that was to change virtually everything about his life. That was a very frightening thing to do, but it was worthwhile. He checked into a rehabilitation center in 2002 and quit drinking and smoking around 2005. Cornell stated in a 1996 interview, "I know what it feels like to be suicidal, and I know what it feels like to be hopeless. There is some point where I learned enough about myself to know that I don't have the tolerance to create other hurdles as well." In 1999, Cornell once said that no one really knows what run-of-the-mill depression is. Most people will think somebody has run-of-the-mill depression, and then the next thing you know, they're hanging from a rope. It's hard to tell the difference. But I do feel that depression can be useful. Sometimes it's just chemical. It doesn't seem to come from anywhere. Cornell's pain mostly came from memories. From before age 14 to 16, when he didn't have any friends. When he stayed home most of the time. And life was pretty great, because at that point, he never did any drugs until he would blow up in his late 20s and relapse back into drugs. Unfortunately, being a child of two alcoholics made Cornell start drinking a lot from a young age, and that's what eventually got him back into drugs. According to Cornell, alcohol is what leads you to everything because it takes away the fear. Cornell was once quoted saying, "The worst drug experimentation I ever did was because I was drunk and didn't care." In 2003, Cornell's struggles with addiction led to a highly publicized stint in rehab. At the time, Cornell was touring with Audioslave, and the band was forced to cancel several shows while Cornell sought treatment. Cornell's bandmates, Tom Morello, Tim Comerford, and Brad Wilk, were supportive of Cornell's decision to seek help, and the band continued to tour and record music together after Cornell's rehab stint. In 2007, Cornell's struggles with addiction resurfaced, and he checked into rehab again. At the time, Cornell was touring with Soundgarden, which had reunited after a 13-year hiatus. Cornell's rehab stint forced the band to cancel several shows, but they continued to tour and record music together after Cornell's treatment. In a 2011 interview, Cornell said the major change when Soundgarden reformed was a lack of alcohol. "The biggest difference I noticed, and we haven't even really talked about it, there are no bottles of Jack Daniels around or beers. And we never talked about it. It's just not there." He became a Greek Orthodox Christian during his relationship with Karayiannis. But in a 2008 television interview, when asked about God, Cornell said that he doesn't follow any particular one, or religion, and ultimately, he thinks he is some sort of a free thinker and kind of open to so many bad things, as well as good things, and that have happened based on people just sort of blindly following religion. In May 2007, Cornell was honored with the Stevie Ray Vaughan Award for his dedication and support of the MusiCares MAP Fund, and his devotion to helping other addicts with the recovery process. On the evening of May 17, 2017, Chris Cornell performed with Soundgarden at the Fox Theater in Detroit. Fans described the show as intense but noticed Cornell seemed off at times. Some reported he appeared tired and struggling with vocal control.
It's great to be back here. Honestly, I love you guys up there on the top shelf, but you gotta fucking stand up and show me something. I have bragged about Detroit crowds for 30 years, so stand the fuck up and make some.
After the concert, he returned to his room at the MGM Grand Detroit Hotel. At 11:35 p.m., he spoke to his wife, Vicky, over the phone. She later recalled that he sounded groggy and was slurring his words. Concerned, she asked his bodyguard, Martin Kirsten, to check on him. Around midnight, Kirsten forced open the locked hotel room door and found Cornell unresponsive on the floor with an exercise band around his neck. He attempted CPR, but it was too late. Cornell was pronounced dead at 1:30 a.m. The official cause of death was ruled as suicide by hanging. However, his family questioned whether it was intentional.
36, the guest was attempting to hang himself. He's not breathing. No.
1 a.m. Detroit Emergency Services take over. Given Chris is a rock star and fearing that he's under the influence of opiates, the emergency services administer Narcan in an attempt to resuscitate him.
Narcan is the brand name for naloxone. It's given to counteract the effects of an opioid overdose such as heroin and can be injected intravenously or into a muscle. I know that Chris didn't have any opioids in his system, so it's clear that it was administered as a precaution.
1:30 a.m. Emergency services spend over an hour attempting to revive him until a doctor arrives. He calls time of death.
Pointing to his use of Ativan, a prescription anti-anxiety drug known to impair judgment and increase suicidal thoughts in some users. His toxicology report confirmed the presence of several prescription drugs.
Was prescribed lorazepam to help him sleep.
Lorazepam is what's known as a benzodiazepine, a psychoactive drug that has a sedative, calming effect on the body. Benzodiazepines work by enhancing the action of the chemical GABA in the brain. GABA is a neurotransmitter that acts as a natural calming agent and helps keep the nerve activity in the brain in balance. It's involved in inducing sleepiness, reducing anxiety, and relaxing muscles. Lorazepam carries a risk of dependency. In addition, the drug can be associated with an increased risk of confusion, disorientation, depression, and sometimes suicidal thoughts.
And loved ones mourned the loss of a voice that defined a generation. From Soundgarden's haunting melodies to Audioslave's raw energy, his music resonated with millions. Beyond his musical genius, Cornell was an advocate for mental health and children's rights. His foundation, the Chris and Vicky Cornell Foundation, continues to support vulnerable children and mental health awareness, ensuring that his compassion lives on. His death serves as a tragic reminder of the silent battles many face, even at the height of success. Cornell once said, "The worst thing about depression is that people who don't have it just don't understand it." Though he is gone, his voice, his words, and his music continue to inspire. He sang of pain, love, and redemption, leaving behind a legacy that will never fade. If you or someone you know is struggling, reach out. Help is always available. That's all for today. If you found this story meaningful, like and subscribe for more content. Let's keep the conversation going.